Welcome to Buckets. I am your host, Brandon Anderson, and this is your playoff stock market part 2 episode. Be sure to go back and listen to part 1 if you haven't already. I'm here with Jim Turvey here today at Turvey Bets in the Action app and on Twitter. What we are doing is we are looking back at 2 months of NBA playoff goodness, taking stock of, okay, what have we learned? Whose stock is up? Whose stock is down? Where have things gone over this marathon that is the NBA playoffs, almost 100 games, and we've watched just about all of them. We haven't actually watched just about all of them, by the way. We're actually recording this on the eve of the NBA finals, so we're giving you like a stock watch from the past for the future as you listen to this, but just kind of taking a sense of, okay, based on everything we've seen and hopefully a little bit the finals ideas as well, whose stock today is down from where it was a couple of months ago. And that's in the eyes of both Jim and I, not necessarily public perception. We're best at just knowing ourselves here. In part 1, we gave out whose stock is up, and a little bit too along the way, what players' stocks are up, but okay, whose teams should we be thinking higher of? We came up with a few sleepers in the East especially that I think we're interested in going forward. We'll see where we go today. Jim, welcome back. Glad to have you on. Excited to talk some stock with you here.
Yeah, me too. You could have even, I think, well, I'd be curious actually. Do you have any names of people in the finals on this list? Because I don't. So we could have kept the surprise, we already gave it away in the first part. But theoretically, I don't think any names will change or their stock will change based on what I have here. Do you have anyone in the finals somehow who you are lower on?
I'm looking. I have... Not really. I have one just drive-by name, and I have one name that I'm probably going to be not willing to actually say out loud on the podcast. That would possibly be it. It's a yeah. No, I can't do it. I can't put myself on record with it. But I do have one possible name, sort of as my very last dishonorable mention, stock down, who will remain an invisible text on my screen unless I get bold later on. You're right. We probably, by nature of playing in the finals, you're probably not a lot of stock down options. My only guy I had was Aaron Wiggins. Just like I thought Aaron Wiggins showed that he was a really strong 6-man scorer in the regular season. He just hasn't even stayed on the court a lot of the times in the playoffs. And maybe that's just because OKC has had so many other options. They haven't needed him to do that. I just felt like he had proven that he was a pretty steady contributor. And then it just, I've been calling for him at times, and then Dags doesn't seem to have a lot of faith in him. So that was just one where I was like, a little disappointing there.
The irony is, I think he could have a really good final. So you may have woken him up, and he could actually be looking really good by the time people listen to this.
Well, we know I love a Wiggins stock down. So if it's got to be Aaron, so be it. We didn't get any other Wiggins in the playoffs this year. All right, so we're going to go through. We'll do at least 5 rounds. We'll kind of call it like we see it as we go here. And we'll talk about guys stock down, however we define it to be. And we'll do some kind of maybe coaching and honorable mention stuff at the end. Again, stock up, the fun one, the optimist. We already got that one out. Go listen to that one first. You'll hear our names there. Or listen after this. I think the order will be fine either way. But we're just going to jump in. Jim, you get the first pick like usual in our stock down playoff market stock watch. Who you got?
I think this is a name that you could, look at and say, really, this is like a top, like, what does this matter? But I will say this is a team that a lot of people before the postseason were high on. I think a lot of people were surprised they exited so early. I think a lot of people think about this team often and will probably be bet on heavily next year too. Their 2 main stars played really, really well. The third guy came in with a reputation, at least, in a relatively brief, small sample of having played really well in the postseason. He was on my honorable mentions when we looked at positive deltas before the postseason. Austin Reeves hit the fucking ejector button this postseason. He had one of the worst series. Now it's a 5-game series, and he's adjusting to Luka and all of this stuff. But man, that is not what you want to see from your third quote unquote star. If you are the Lakers, if you're JJ Redick, if you're LeBron and Luka, that's not really what you want as your third, the third person in your little trio of players there. If you really think you have hope in LA. I was skeptical of LA. I wasn't this skeptical of Reeves. I'll be honest. The cap wasn't Reeves is going to eject and be terrible and lose the series. Luka and LeBron played pretty well. In fact, LeBron, if we go by BPM, LeBron was outstanding. Luka was pretty solid, and Reeves was just downright abysmal. So I didn't want to overreact too much in him having, a very good small sample before. I don't want to overreact too much. I'm definitely not going to be listing him on the positive side of the ledger if we do this again next year. And I this was a one where if you'd asked me my gut, I would have said Reeves looks like a guy who could really get picked on in the playoffs, and the shot might fade in and out, and having, the ball as the number 3 option might not be the best for him. The logic behind it makes sense to be on the downside of things. So I'm using this as a bit of confirmation bias, but he's going to be closer to the negative side of the ledger for me next year after having been an honorable mention on the positive side. So in terms of delta, he had to be my number 1 pick here.
Yeah, and just to be clear, what you're referring to, because we haven't said on this podcast, you and I did a couple months ago a similar draft to this before the playoffs of 2 parts. What players did we think were going to have the biggest delta up into the playoffs and which players down into the playoffs? So that's the list you're talking about for next year, is that Reeves is looking like a down for you. I had Reeves in my top 5 for choices here too. And frankly, I had him 5th. The only reason I didn't have him higher is because it's only 5 games and it's like not enough of a sample to know for sure that he sucked. But man, did he suck for 5 games. He was so bad. He had a minus 3.7 BPM. He had 100 offensive rating on his possessions, 32% on threes, on huge volume on threes, on LeBron setting you up threes, so we know they're open threes. He did not get to the free throw line at all. Like average like a 1.5 free throws a game. Remember the whole thing last year when he broke out was he became this like free throw merchant for the back half of the season when he got the incredible whistle for a while. So that's a huge drop for him. 41% field goals, just food on defense anytime that they wanted to go after him. I never was as high as the public seemed to suddenly be on Austin Reeves, but man, he was terrible. No slander meant here. Zach Lowe obviously is better at this job than anybody in the media probably at NBA stuff. I remember Zach talking on his podcast about Austin Reeves, future multi-time NBA All-Star for sure. This dude ain't not a future NBA All-Star from what we saw in this playoff. So maybe he had food poisoning, had a bad week or something. But based only on the data we have, man, he was so bad.
Yeah, he really was atrocious. And again, it seems silly to have this as a first pick, but the Lakers are always going to be in this conversation. And he is the third quote unquote star there. So I think it actually is kind of important. It leaves me thinking, as we go into next year, unless some things change, I probably will be out on the Lakers again, in part because of my Luka skepticism, in part because another year of LeBron, in part because their third star really looked terrible in the postseason.
That's funny. The playoffs are so long and the NBA season is so long that as you just talked about that and we thought about him for the next season, it dawned on me that as I just described Austin Reeves and how he was getting passes from LeBron, I was picturing the entire time I delivered that speech as LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Austin Rivers. And I'm like, oh, wait, no, that's a totally different version of this team. They have Luka Doncic now. Still hasn't completely settled into me. But it is good podcasting to lead with a Laker at the top.
It is.
Here we are. Playoffs are over. Lakers have been out for months now. We still got a Laker at the top. I'm going to stay on brand a little bit. I'm going to go with another big market and take a team that I think is supposed to be their third star. I'm going to take the bullet for you, Jim. Mikal Bridges was so disappointing this entire postseason run. Just an absolute nothing burger. And I know you can cherry pick a few spots, and they're important spots. I know he had like a huge overtime period where he came through and helped them get the win after doing very little before that the rest of the game. I think that was in the Detroit series. Maybe that was one of the early Celtics games. I know he had a game-saving defensive play in one of those Celtics series. I know there are good moments. Mikal Bridges is a dude that they emptied the bank for. Like, they gave everything for him. He's up for contract extension and a max extension possibly. This dude didn't play like a third star. He didn't even play like a 3-and-D wing star at all. Like, he just was not good. He's taking over 12 twos a game, 51% on 12 twos in the playoffs. This is the guy that's supposed to be leading the second string offense. He's the answer to Jalen Brunson not having to do everything all the time. And he was not the answer, to the point where they had to keep running it through Josh Hart, who should not be the backup point guard running the offense. And we saw Hart got benched in the third round because he couldn't do it. And Mikal still couldn't step up there. He can't initiate the offense. The advanced metrics are not there. And admittedly, they're usually not going to be strong for a 3-and-D type. But like the not advanced metrics aren't there either. There are no metrics for Mikal Bridges that look kind. 52% true shooting on sub 20 usage. You don't pay what you pay for this guy to get sub 20% usage. And you definitely don't pay it to get that small of usage and still be that inefficient. Like, at least if you're going to do nothing super well and defend really well. I didn't feel like he was a super impactful defender, and I didn't feel like he was hitting the knockdown shots. Way back in the preseason, we saw his shot debut and we're like, what are you doing? Like, what? We reworked it to that. I don't know, man. Like, this, to me, he was by far the worst Knicks starter of a talented starting five, obviously, that made a conference finals. But I thought he was overall a negative for them on the postseason and just very disappointing to me. A total nothing burger.
I was definitely disappointed. I don't think I was as disappointed to you. I do think the defense, especially in that Boston series, was very important. I think it really did hold value, the defense he brought on that side of things. But on the offensive side, I'm with you. Like there were a couple of little memorable moments here and there. But the thing he does where he like can turn any like open layup into a fadeaway turnaround two that goes in half the time is really brutal. And I don't want to armchair psychologist or whatever here, but there I remember there's kind of a baseball zag that talks about how Cal Ripken Jr. played in every game, and like the zag was, did it actually kind of hurt his production? Like if he sat like maybe a couple days, could he have been fresher and maybe gotten to a few more balls in the infield and maybe hustled out a couple infield hits? I do wonder if Bridges is like avoiding contact, maybe not even intentionally out of that like wanting to stay in the game, but it's just like his style of play isn't a very physical style, and that's why he's able to play all these games. But if he can get to the line a little bit more, and even if that sprinkles in, he got banged up because he went hard and, took it at the defense, I would rather that, to be honest, because if you're out there and you're not really bringing any value on the offensive side, maybe it's me again, I could just be seeing a pattern where there isn't one. But overall, Bridges' offense really was disappointing in this postseason. I didn't have him on my list because I really only because I looked so much for Delta here. I didn't, I think you prioritize like this person was bad and he was bad. I just I didn't think of him before the postseason, and I'm not even thinking of all that much because I do think the defense was there, and I think the Knicks had a good enough run that I'm letting a few of them off the hook. I do think that's, maybe I could, if I circle back, I was like, you know what, I do need to be a little harsher on his team. I didn't have him on my list, but when you said it, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm with it. I probably wouldn't have him second pick, but I definitely would add him to my list after hearing your case.
Yeah, he for me was, even my next few picks are going to be much starrier names than him, but for me, he just was a clear number one with a bullet. So off the top, we got a Laker and a Knick. Giving the people what they want. Let's see if we can get off the Lakers and Knicks with our third pick.
We'll go to a quiet little team no one's heard of in the Northeast here, the Boston Celtics. And this one is a depressing one. And this one is only because, again, we're going Delta here. This is a player who historically has been awesome in the postseason. You referenced him in the last podcast as a pivot piece in many postseasons. Last season, he was central to the Celtics winning a title. I fear we have reached Drew Holiday's cooked season, and it's really sad to see because he's one of my favorite players of all time, one of my favorite humans in the league too, which like we can separate the numbers from all that, but like it's just a bummer to see Drew not really looking like Drew, not really contributing all that much to the postseason. I don't have all that much more to say about it, to be honest. It just doesn't, and sometimes we think people are cooked, they come back. I hope that's the case, but I'm definitely not having Drew in my positives column next year when I look ahead towards the postseason.
Yeah, we kind of held out hope, I think, that there was a playoff gear. There was not a playoff gear. He stayed in second gear. He did play hurt, so I had him 10th on my list, just I think because it hurt me to put him too much higher. But I'm giving a little credit for maybe this is just you were never really quite healthy and you got it out and gave us what you could. But, we had guys in our last podcast, Donovan Mitchell, Aaron Gordon, who played hurt and still gritted and came through. And Holiday certainly is the guy that you and I would have expected to be a gritted and came through sort of player, and has been many other times. Just wasn't that dude this year. And it's a bummer. I moved him, I think, as much as anyone. I knew he had to be in the list somewhere, and I had him like higher up. And then I was like, no, can't tell much. I'll just put him in the dishonorable mentions with a sad footnote. And I was like, no, he's the way that you and I and many others have relished how much he adds to teams and how valuable he is, means that for him to be what he is now, it's a real drop. And to a lesser extent, I'm going to guess you probably don't have this guy as a draft pick. He was in my dishonorable mentions. Mike Conley, kind of same sort of case there, is just like, even in the series against OKC, I know he was important because he was the one guy that could take care of the basketball. But the number is just like, you can't have a guy doing 0 on offense and still being, not exactly a positive defender at his age either. So I think the Timberwolves, I think both those teams, to contend with what they'd like to be going forward, are going to need a newer, fresher version of those players. It sucks. Two of my absolute, like, that just makes me feel old, right? Like, just two guys that we have only ever had positive things to say about, but age comes for us all, unless you're LeBron James, who won't be in any of our Delta conversations because he just keeps doing all the things every year.
It's incredible. If I hop in real quick, we like to do the kind of every now and then zoom out, on these conversations and make it actionable. We had the Celtics conversation a little bit in the last podcast talking about Derek White and how good he was. And the framing of that was, he's so good, maybe they can trade him. Here it's Drew. We have questions about it. I've got another name on this list. I know you have another name to that other name. The news isn't great for Boston. Is this like, no. Do we think the market's going to adjust, or do we think the market is going to say a player like Tatum is worth, 4 points to the spread? And honestly, with the depth Boston has, you could even make a case for the market only saying 3. That brings them down to like an SRS of like +5. That's still a really good team. I will be way out on the Celtics again if that is where the market comes in on them preseason. Are you going to be kind of skeptical as well, or are you going to?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely yes. If it's just run it back, I just think that we're not doing the run it back version, so it's hard to give a real answer because it seems very clear based on all the scuttlebutt you're hearing right now. Like, multiple dudes, like the year is lost already. Like, best case scenario is you drag to the playoffs in like the 4 to 6 seed range and get Tatum back. But I don't even know. I don't think Tatum plays next year. Like, no sourcing. Just, that's the franchise. And we've seen Kevin Durant in particular take his time, take a real long time, like 18 months, and still be about what he was before. And we have not seen that from most Achilles guys. I think Tatum is too good, too valuable to risk rushing back like 10 months later from what's normally been effectively a career-ending sort of injury. And if that's the case, and Drew Holiday and some of the other guys coming up are all in the downswing, I think anything goes for Boston, and maybe this is a full reset, and maybe it even ends up being like the Warriors reset year. Like, it could really bottom out depending on where they want to go. I don't know that I'd be ready to bet no playoffs right now or like top 5 pick or something, but I think a lot depends on where do the rosters go. If it's just Tatum's out and we're running it back, I think initially I'd be like, defense and team culture. I don't know. Like, we're going to have a bunch of dudes miss like 40 games. And then the star player whose best ability was availability playing no games. That doesn't seem like a great formula. Like, this is not an SRS subtraction net rating situation to me. And it's weird because I don't think you and I feel like Tatum necessarily is the biggest multiplier to like elevate everyone around him, but maybe it's seeing how he's been a team elevator just because of how much he does all the things for them. But I think it's a little bit of just the team around him was ready for a refresh. I think even if they had held up and made a run this year, it probably was going to get there too. So yeah,
this could be absence makes the heart grow fonder with Tatum out and the Celtics implode. Maybe you and I are a little higher on Tatum after the season.
That may be true. I guess we missed out on putting Jason Tatum in our stock up watch. So maybe not stock up. Speaking of a star on the wing, I'm gonna go star here. This is a personal pick for me. I'm ready to move on, Jim. Kawhi Leonard, stock down. It's over. Kawhi Leonard played the 7 games. Your 5% outcome. He played 250 minutes in the playoffs healthy, and he was fine. He wasn't bad. He was good. He had one elite game, game 2, 39 points, and we all freaked out, and everyone had the podcast, and we all wrote articles. He's kind of just a guy other than that game. He was a pretty much no-show in game 7. He did not do things to elevate the team at all. Certainly did not elevate teammates. I thought he really showed his flaws as a playmaker or lack thereof in that series when there was a chance to do that. We didn't get the defensive star leap that we have in the past. I know this sounds petty, but if we go back to our podcast on the Delta, this is the guy that I've said, man, if we could just get healthy Kawhi has been Michael Jordan in his career. No more. That's the last time I'm saying it. The past is the past. I've never been the guy to buy into any version of this pretend Clippers team anyway. But the only reason I had to at least pretend about them was Kawhi turning back into MJ, if he possibly did. We got the healthy version. It hadn't been for some number of years, so I didn't know if it was there. It's not there. I'm done. We can get a throwback game. I still like the guy. I enjoy watching him. But from a drop-off standpoint, this is a guy that I treated as, if he's healthy, he's in the Jokic, Shea, Giannis, win a title for you tier of guys. I don't think it's there anymore. And it maybe just hasn't been for years. I'm just finally admitting it to myself.
I was curious if he would make your list and if the soliloquy would sound a lot like it just did. And for me personally, I think you did a lot of like the numbers side of it. I think I do want to go over to the kind of soft side of it and shout out Matt, who has consistently, he and I argued a lot before that Clipper series of Kawhi is not like the leader you want, like, and he is not as good as people think he is. Like Matt is the Kawhi skeptic, and he nailed that absolutely. And it was his Denver team, and he read that absolutely perfectly. So it's like the numbers weren't there, the vibes weren't there, the leadership wasn't there. It's like I have he was 7th in BPM this postseason. I put he was last in vibes and leadership PM. Like
last in vibes.
It is such a look beyond the numbers, and it was clear that like it didn't work, and it once that crumbles, the veneer crumbles a little bit. It's easy to look back in hindsight and say, man, yeah, Matt nailed that right there, and I'm with you. I'm probably not going to get roped in again. Hopefully, who knows? We'll come back next year and somehow talk ourselves.
We're gonna have to play this back to ourselves in the future, I think. All right, give us our 5th pick and your 3rd overall.
If I had any dignity, this would have been my first. But I'm a very stubborn person, and so I will caveat it to a degree. But it's Darius Garland. This was the guy who I bet him for Finals MVP on one of our podcasts we talked about together, because I was in on the Cavs and I was in on Darius Garland. I will say the reason was definitely injuries. However, what I will say to the saying of it was injuries is it was so obvious. I have this discussion very often with a basketball friend of mine who is very big on you can't be a small guard and go far in the playoffs. He's kind of a Chris Paul hater. I've always been a Chris Paul lover. It's really tough physically to hold up as a small guard in a postseason run. Darius Garland only made it to the 2nd round. Chris Paul at least got to a finals. But there were plenty of times where small guards, as talented and good as they are, and as clutch as Darius Garland, I do think he's a clutch player. I genuinely believe that. But it's really hard to hold up in the postseason if you're that frame. He's such a like thin, kind of small framed player. I really do think that is tough to especially in the as physical as we have seen this postseason. So I am down on him only in the sense that, man, he does have that frame that we really don't see hold up very often in the postseason. If he is in the postseason and it's a round where he is healthy, I'm going to be very interested in Darius Garland. I think he has a lot of talent, and I will spit in the face of the numbers that are telling me that he has not been a good playoff player. I will ride this again. But the health of it is where I was 100% wrong and was a big missing gap in my Cavs cap as a whole this season, and really is something I want to make sure I'm cognizant of in the future, because it's just the history is not there for players of his frame to hold up over the course of what you said. It's a grueling postseason run. It's really tough if you're that frame. So Garland, he will no longer be on my high list. He'll be in the middle, and if he's healthy, I'll love him, and he probably won't be healthy for the whole postseason.
I'm about to say the most podcast thing ever, but it's a grueling postseason because we're 2 months in, and Jim, I'm tired. Like, I am tired out from the grueling postseason of all the podcasts and the late nights sitting on my couch watching games. Like, the postseason is a marathon, and it's hard to hold up. Darius Garland probably would have been my number 1 pick here, except that he only played 5 games and played all of them hurt at some level. So it's, again, kind of the Reeves thing of a sample size of partly I was down on Garland between the two of us, certainly, but I think especially just generally, I was down on Garland anyway, skeptical. He was in my negative delta list into the playoffs. And so I can't quite be as further down on him, but the numbers are ghastly. Like, if what he did is representative of who he is, then he's number 1 because he's an all-star player that was like outright damaging to the team, cost them games in that series as the 1 seed. Like you could argue, you could make a case that he maybe is the case for LVP of the playoffs for a team that like here we are with the 4 seed in the NBA Finals. The
Yeah.
Cavs, the path was wide open for them to not even have to beat the Celtics and make it to the finals. And I think a healthy and good Darius Garland, with what he's supposed to be, they are in the finals and they might even have a shot in the finals. And instead, they're not a team we're talking about at all,
Yeah.
despite the fact, a little spoiler, if you haven't listened to our first episode, we were real high on Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley as guys who really showed how good they were. So Garland, maybe not the last Cavs guard to appear on our draft today. So that might be part of the problem too.
Yeah, he's on my list.
Yeah. All right. So top 5 so far: Austin Reeves, Mikal Bridges, Drew Holiday, Kawhi Leonard, and Darius Garland. I'm going to go with another guard and another guy that is oft injured as well. And at this point, we have to factor it in on him too. Jamal Murray. I just don't know if I'm ready to trust Jamal Murray anymore. This hurts. I love Jamal Murray. When Jamal is on, he's so fun. The problem is we got 14 games from Denver, not a small sample because they went the full limit both rounds. He really had one classic Jamal Murray game. Game 5 against the Clippers, 2-2. It was a huge moment. We got a huge Jamal game. I think he hit 8 threes. That was kind of it. He just did not look the part of, certainly he's not 1B. When Jokic is 1A, he's 1A, 1B, 1C. That's all Nikola Jokic. But Jamal did not look like number 2. We talked on the last pod about Aaron Gordon as the second best Nugget. I don't think that's an Aaron Gordon stat. I think that's a Jamal Murray stat. Like Jamal Murray has to be the second best guy on this team, where the Nuggets can't go any further than where they did. You and I look at BPM a lot. 2.1 BPM in 14 games. It's not terrible, but it's nowhere near good enough. It's nowhere near what he was in the title run. He was minus 1.4 BPM in 12 games last year. He was my LVP a year ago. I thought Jamal Murray was last year's Darius Garland. I thought Jamal Murray last year cost the Nuggets a title berth and a chance for us to see the Celtics-Nuggets series that a lot of us wanted to see. I thought he shot them out of the series basically against Minnesota. Now in 14 games this year, 10 of the 14, he had a 2 or below BPM, including a bunch of zeros and negatives in there. And he was a complete no-show both game 7s. And that's the games we expect Jamal Murray to show up. Like that's going into a game 7, you figure this is the dude you want on your side. And this is now 2 pretty mediocre to terrible playoff runs in a row. And I feel like we've talked about the upside of Denver. We talked about believing in David Adelman. If Denver doesn't have the second star, I don't know how far they really can go. And we love Aaron Gordon. Michael Porter Jr. like gritted through just like a shredded shoulder. Credit where that's due. It's got to be Jamal. There's no other option than it to be Jamal as the actual second guy. And I feel like I have to stay skeptical of what Denver's true ceiling can be until we see Jamal actually do the run again. Otherwise, he becomes like the guard version of Kawhi Leonard to me, where I'm just waiting on something imaginary to come around again.
Yeah, he was next pick for me as well. It's pretty interesting. I think we do have like a pretty clear defined tier here of players who showed themselves to kind of have a drop. For me, there's kind of a line of demarcation here, and I do think it's like, to me, the names that we just talked about are like very pivotal looking forward. It's Celtics, it's Lakers. Do you have a teardrop here as well? Do you have anyone else that you think?
Yeah, no, my next pick is going to be like really off the board here. So it's definitely like that was the drop for me, I think.
That's funny. So we very much had those same names that are on like key teams, key players.
Yeah.
I'm going to shift my vibe a little bit to players that I was super high on and I'm now a little bit less high on, because I have about 3 of those guys that I think all fit in this tier.
That's kind of where I'm at too. So I'm curious where you go here.
Yeah, these are guys who very high on, and now I'm just like, I see it, but I'm no longer like just hand in hand with you walking into battle. I think the top of them has to be Jimmy Butler, and I think in part because I think there's a very easy case to be made that those runs that Jimmy went on in the Eastern Conference, unless he goes back to the Eastern Conference, they're not there anymore. Now, the numbers are actually pretty decent for Jimmy. And, they lost Steph. That's entirely fair. They actually got to the second round. But I kind of think we do this thing. I think it's a really fun thing that we'll kind of look back in like 5 or 6 years on rosters and be like, oh, that team, like, wow, LeBron really carried that team. Or that team, that Raptors team actually sneaky had a lot of really good players. I kind of think that this Warriors team is one that down the road we're going to be like, man, that was kind of a really good team. And if Steph had stayed healthy, I wonder how far that team goes. Like, I still like the long term ceiling of Podziemski. I think Kuminga has a role in this league somewhere. I even think like we could see like a Guy Santos or someone who like pops at some point. Like, I think this Warriors team isn't that bad. And I think that Jimmy not being able to get them past the Minnesota team that then got absolutely just demolished by OKC makes me think that Jimmy isn't quite the superhero he once was. I think that he still is a very valuable player, and in the right setting potentially could have been a key contributor. But like Jimmy was kind of in that Kawhi tier, if not maybe a hair below. But Jimmy's playoff history was pretty incredible, and I just don't think he has that ceiling anymore. Even especially, and this is like beyond the numbers, he wasn't taking enough shots. He didn't have the gear to go and lead the team. So of the kind of names here, I've got three names that I was really high on, and I just kind of sanded down the edges a bit. Butler is the one for me that kind of I have the biggest, not even a worry, but just like I'm not putting him in the tier that he previously was in.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I actually didn't have Butler on either of my lists at all, but I think you made a pretty good case for why he probably ought to be on this list, just because he was a guy that you had him pretty high on the positive delta, and I had commented that the only reason he wasn't on my list is because I thought he was always that good. He was not that good in these playoffs. I think for me, the reason I left him off is my whole thing with my read on the Warriors coming into the playoffs was that blowing game 82, blowing in some ways the play-in game that they were way ahead and then needed a big comeback to get at the end, and then playing with their food even against the Rockets going 7. To me, like all that attrition, I knew was going to catch up with the Warriors. Along the way, I forget exactly which game. I think it might have been the play-in game or early in the Houston series. Fowler had like a big bruised tailbone injury. I think he even missed a game or two. And I honestly just don't think he was ever right again after
That's
that.
fair.
And so maybe that's just excusing it. Certainly, like some of the stuff you said about Kawhi and like you got to be the leader and show up and lead. When Steph is out, like Draymond's going to be Draymond, but Butler has to be that dude. And he did not look the part at all. It's just like on court leader, give me the ball. I got to go get us a bucket. I'm the scorer on this team. Was very disappointing for sure, especially against Minnesota, his old team, a team that we know his disdain he has for that team. It's just like you didn't see the fire at all. And maybe, again, I'm going to give a little bit of discount, I guess, because I'm a homer on the Warriors thing here. Maybe to me, that's like, okay, maybe the Butler injury was worse than we thought, and or maybe the Steph injury is worse than we thought. And they just knew that we're cooked either way. We maybe could make a push on the Timberwolves, but we're not getting further than that if Steph's not going to play anyhow. It's hard to get the fire up if you know that Steph's not going to be there. I actually, in our stock up, I didn't mention them. I had Podziemski like way down on my list as just like, yeah, he's a dude. He like actually looks like a real rotation guy. And I had the new look Warriors just conceptually as a stock up of like, I know it didn't work here because of the injuries. I kind of like actually. I feel like there's still that could be. We'll see. That could be. We might have one more possible run with these Warriors that just won't go away a decade later still. So yeah, I think that's an interesting pick. I can't get there because of some of the caveats, but I might be blinded to those caveats. I will admit that. I'm going to go in a similar vein with a player that is just disappointed me personally a little bit. And I think this is going to come off harsh. I'm going to get mocked, I'm sure, for this one. Anthony Edwards is my pick.
He was my next pick.
Was he on your list?
He was my next pick. Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for letting me take the bullet on my star and my team here. I appreciate it. Yeah, to me, look, Ant's the star that just made back-to-back consecutive conference finals. How could he possibly be disappointing? Well, because we are hyping him as the next Michael Jordan, next face of the league, next MVP, next win a championship guy. He has not been that guy either of these two runs. He has been for like 2 games each series in the runs, but he hasn't been consistent enough. Now, look, he's only 23, so he's not going to make me eat my words. Like, great, happy to eat my words. Go win all the MVPs and championships in Minnesota. Like, I'm rooting for him. Love watching him. Love the guy. I think right now the way we talk about him in the media, he's not consistently great enough to be that guy. I think it's a little bit, and you and I texted about this, and with Joe as well, and we got some like terrible emoji replies to this. Are we sure Ant is not Super Booker right now? Like the version of where Booker can touch the face of God when everything is going right, but we don't get that version enough. And with Ant, again, with the BPMs, just 6.0 this year. That's not bad. That's a star number. But we talk about Ant like he's like a 10 guy, and he was 2 years ago for a short run. He did get to that number. That's part of why we're so high. I think we had him like top 3 in our biggest risers playoff list. It's why we bet on, number 1, why we bet on Minnesota and why we like them, even though they had Rudy and Randall on our other list of the bad guys. And it's ironic that Randall became one of the risers and Ant becomes a little bit of a faller here. To me, it's a long way to go. At age 23, the best is still to come. But the way we talk about him as a future MVP, future title winner, top 5 player, right now with what we've seen in these 2 playoff runs, he's like a half step behind those things to me. And I just need to see a little bit more and a little bit more consistency from him.
Yeah, it's very funny. It's very fitting. You mentioned Julius Randle being, Julius Randle was the number 1 pick on the negative side, and we brought him up. And now Ant was the number 1 pick on, the other side. We brought him down a little bit. It's like basically the theory of, bet the highest regular season win total under and bet the lowest regular season win total over, and they'll meet in the middle, right? The extremes always come together. So it really is just a lot of that. I'll say the only thing I'll add on, I agree with every point you made, is that this is just a standard. We're holding him to a certain standard. But I will say I was watching some of the playoffs with someone, and she pointed out the conditioning of Anthony Edwards, and you pushed back on this a little bit. I do think that there is something there. He's someone who looks like he's in the greatest shape of any human alive. He's so clearly incredibly athletic. But I do think that there is a conditioning aspect to this. Now, I tried to dig into the numbers. I couldn't really find anything like struggling down the stretch of fourth quarters and taking fewer field goal attempts. But there is, the passivity is a very interesting thing. I think it's easy to say when teams are blitzing you, like, well, the smart play is to push out through it. We've seen the face of the league types. LeBron does sometimes go in that, like when LeBron was becoming LeBron, there were the games where he'd have 11 field goal attempts against the Mavericks and everyone chewed him up. And then he came back and it was like you don't have to force it, but you can find a way to impact the game even when the entire game plan is for you to not impact it. And I think that the spot that Ant is not quite at LeBron's level at, first of all, LeBron's a savant, and maybe Ant will grow into that savant level. He's not that level of passer yet. He doesn't see the court like that just yet. But I do think there is some level of conditioning that Ant is not quite at, that he's kind of burning out of steam in these later playoff runs. He was so good in the first 2 rounds, and we've seen him kind of sputter out in the conference finals. You're playing tougher teams. That also makes sense. Like, this is not to, again, this is a very high standard here, but I think there's a very good chance he's the best athlete in the league. LeBron took that and said, I'm also going to be the best conditioned athlete in the league. I want Ant to not just be 50th percentile conditioned. I want him to be the best conditioned athlete in the league. And I don't think he's even close to that right now. I think Jokic has a case of being better conditioned despite looking, the joke about, Embiid and Jokic, who's been better conditioned. It clearly is Jokic. And I want to see Ant get to that level of peak condition so he really can press when he needs to in smart ways, not force it or anything. But I want to see a little bit more from Ant. Again, you and I love Ant. He was our first pick consensus in the Delta before. He'll be on the positive again for us, but I don't think he'll be number 1 next year. So this is just standing down the edge of a top pick, but I was with you on having him on the list for sure.
Yeah, I tell you what, the man can rebound. Let's give him credit for the rebounds. We love an Ant rebound. Can hardly slander a guy after he brings us home a 50-1 winner for that.
I can't believe we got him on the negative after he hit that bet for us. But
I realized that as we're talking about him. How dare I do that to Anthony Edwards after all he's done for me? I want to put you on the spot with this question. I've got an answer to if you don't know off the top of your head. If you would have set a market right now, and you got to give a yes/no market. So I want the yes odds. What are the odds that you'd give me as a book on Anthony Edwards will, in his career, win an NBA MVP trophy? I want the yes odds for that.
I think I would give you plus money. If I look at where the league is right now, in fact, I bet a proxy of this because there was a book that offered I think it was like basically when will there be the next like American MVP, because Ant is
Mhm.
probably the best chance we have. There's like
Yeah.
it's like Halliburton maybe is the other, but if you look at
Yeah.
who's coming up here with yeah with you've got Jokic, you've got Luka, you've got
Yeah.
Wemby, you've got Shea. I It's pretty tough to picture Ant cracking through there. I think I would give plus money, but I will say this: if you said what are the odds of Ant getting a Finals MVP, I almost would put that at a lower number because he has
Mm.
done the thing in the postseason. He's in a pretty good spot with his team. Like if you told me Luca versus Ant, who gets more MVPs, I'd say Luca. If you said Luca versus Ant, who gets more Finals MVPs, I'd say Ant. I like the way his
Interesting.
game translates over. I think he's in a really good setup in Minnesota. So I'm gonna kind of flip it back on you, but I would give you. I think I would give you plus money. Where would you set it?
Yeah, I'm surprised. Yeah, I think I'm even more aggressive than you. I think I'd go like plus 200, plus 250. Like, I think it's tough to win MVP, man. And
Yeah,
MVPs win multiple MVPs. I think, Shea's very likely going to win at least one more MVP. As good as OKC is, as good as he is. Jokic is still in the mix. You named other names that I'd have all ahead of him, and there's only one each year for an
yep.
individual award. It's tough to win MVP, and the bar is high, but that's the bar we've set for him, and that's why he's on this list for us. All right, we are getting into the nitty gritty here. Let's can we do one more round and honorable mentions, or do we need to go a couple more rounds? A couple
No, I'm
lightning
fine.
rounds or
I'm
one
honestly
round?
fine. I'm fine. I'm fine going into a little bit quicker round in general.
Okay,
I'll go with
well,
a quick one that I have to hold myself to accountability. Another Cavs guard. I'll eat them both. Ty Jerome, my beloved Cavalier, who I thought was really going to translate well, and man, he cost himself tens of $1 million and me tens of $1 million of take equity with his performance. Really not what I wanted to see. I'll give him one more postseason, but I'm definitely not going to go in giving him the benefit of the doubt. He's going to have to earn it back. He's the type of player who, confidence wise, like I do weigh that a little bit when I look at like trying to translate something to the postseason. He's one of the most confident players in the league. Problem is when you're confident and then you're just bad in the postseason, it leads to, it's almost a multiplier because you're still taking shots and you don't really know when to change your game. So he was really disappointing to me. Have to have him on here because he was a guy who I thought would translate pretty well.
Yeah, Ty Jerome was 7th on my list as well, and I basically had the same thing. Cost himself, I thought, like $50 million in the playoffs. The only other thing I'd add is, will we give him one more postseason? Because somebody's going to sign him, and I don't think they're going to be in the postseason next year
Well,
based
that's a fair
on
point.
what we saw from his value here. Just unplayable at times, really disappointing. I'm going to go one more in that, like, the shine has to be, taken a little bit down on it. I'm going to come after your guy here. Well, I don't know, but it's your guy, but your team. I'm going to put Jalen Brunson on the list here. And it's more of Jalen Brunson conceptually, I think. So it's a little bit different of a pick. It's Jalen Brunson, the team building player. And this is not about does Jalen make teams better? Absolutely he does. It's not about does Jalen elevate teammates? I think he does that too. Jalen Brunson conceptually, I'm down on in these playoffs. Number one, just not fun to watch. Stop with the grifting and the fouling and all that crap. Like, I'm so tired of talking about it. I can't do it anymore. Number two, the size thing matters here for Jalen Brunson too. He's wearing down in series and late in playoff runs. And I think ultimately, because of Brunson ball and the style that he is, the team doesn't function well when he's off the court, but they're not quite good enough when he's doing the Brunson ball thing on the court. I think we talked about Mikal Bridges. We haven't talked about Cat only because we were both down on Cat anyways. Otherwise, I think he probably gets onto a list like this also. I think Brunson is a little bit responsible for those guys' value being lower because he has to beat so much of the ball as Brunson dribbling and doing the Brunson thing, which is electric and really good. But I think it takes away from what the rest of the team can do. I think Brunson, we talked about Donovan Mitchell the last time. I said I thought Donovan Mitchell, he was my top pick for the stock up guys. I called him what people think Jalen Brunson is. I think Brunson is a glass ceiling, and I think we just saw as good as it gets for a Jalen Brunson team. I think he has knockoff James Harden, and I'm very high on James Harden, but I don't think Brunson as the star is a winning championship formula. I think this was as good as it gets. So conceptually, stock down on Jalen Brunson.
Man, we really can't share this with Joe because I'm right there with you. You know who Jalen has turned into? His old teammate. He is a heliocentric player
Yeah.
who which again, I am always skeptical of that translating to the postseason. Doesn't play defense, grifts, whines, doesn't get back. He has become Luka Doncic. They are very similar players in my mind. And if I'm gonna, have a lot of energy for Luka hate, I always have energy for that. I really do have to bring it with Brunson. And to be honest, watching this postseason, I felt the same way. I became very skeptical of the long-term ceiling of the possibility here. And again, he's outstanding in those clutch fourth quarter performances, but it's almost like the Tibbs thing where it's like Tibbs doesn't trust his bench during the regular season, and it burns him because he doesn't know who to go to in the postseason. Brunson doesn't trust anyone. He doesn't get the ball moving. There were times in the postseason I thought the Knicks offense looked better with Brunson on the bench. The ball actually moved around. And I get that he is the guy who carries you to certain things. That's why I hate that type of player, because you're landlocked. You can't possibly talk yourself into getting rid of that player. But the ceiling isn't there.
Wow.
And I really do think that Brunson has really just become Luka 2.0, just a little bit smaller. So if anything, a little bit worse.
Yeah, all right. I am going to call an audible for me. I'm the host, so I'm making up my own rule. I get one extra pick, and then after I make my one extra pick, because it's for the brand, you can give me any number of dishonorable mentions you want to add to our list. But I need this to be a standalone pick with the actual picks, because even for me, Jim Turvey, Jaylen Brown goes on the disappointing list. He stunk in these playoffs. Even for me, the fifth starter on the Celtics, Jaylen Brown guy, 3.5 turnovers a game, sub 50% on 12 twos a game. He did not step up when Jason Tatum went down and they needed him to be the guy. Derek White stepped up. Derek White made all of the threes and won a game on his own. Jaylen Brown was present watching Derek White make all the threes and winning a game on his own. Brown has never been a good three-point shooter. His offensive rating was not great. He is a 30% usage guy, way too high for not a star player. And for me, I had Jaylen Brown in my maybe up delta before the playoffs. Remember, I said a nice thing about Jaylen Brown. He does sort of look in the playoffs like the guy people talk about him as. Nope, it's out. I got no good things about Jaylen Brown. I retract my positive Jaylen Brown. Stock back down for Jaylen Brown. He needed to be on my draft list, so I'm including him as our honorary, dishonorary 11th pick. What do you think?
Celtics fans have already DM'd both of us angrily. I don't even know if I can save it at all. I will say I do think we have mentioned injuries for other players. He was clearly playing through stuff, and I actually will give him credit for playing through stuff. And I was going to tell on you for texting that, secretly JB may actually be the player in the postseason. This is a guy I very much would want to give a fresh postseason look at. But I will say I'll transition in. I'll start my dishonorable mentions. Two other Celtics, Porzingis. Was never even all that high, but it's done. And I don't want to shit on a guy who seems like maybe there is a very serious health thing, but he just has to be on the Celtics shouldn't even really count on him until something something is solved there. And I'll quickly transition. There's a few other players I want to say. I think Joe Mazzulla as a coach, we have to come down on him a little bit, right? I mean, listen, you lose your star player for sure. That's what ended the series. But they were down 3-1 there, and he did not have adjustments for when they were blowing those game ones and game two. How do you see game one and not make it? Now the players have to do it, but he's got to. You can't tell me that if Rick Carlisle were the coach of that team, he would not have adjusted and game two would not have gone that way. So Mazzulla was one that I thought secretly definitely kind of was a drop in perception for me on the coaching side. I'll shout a couple names
real quick, just so I can jump in on Celtics. I had just conceptually just the Celtics. Just Celtics stock down. Celtics future stock down. KP bad. Drew gone. Tatum hurt. Jaylen Brown on my list. To me, they went from being the guy in the East to they're very much at best one of the guys next year. And I don't even know if they're that necessarily. And I also put, much to my own chagrin, because it took me a long time to get there and a lot of lost money to get there, threes volume for favorites as stock down. That you and Joe were on that, and many others throughout. It just didn't work to be all about the threes as the favored team, leaving open all that shot variance, and it bit them. And maybe if they're up 3-1 rather than down 3-1, they still survive even without Tatum, and maybe they even beat the Pacers, and they probably get walloped in the finals, but we think about them very differently and this version of the team differently. But I think those two both they were kind of next up on my dishonorable list as well.
Man, I can already think of like 4 to 5 people who are definitely currently DMing as they listen to this. So we save it, Celtics fans. I don't need to hear it. I will quickly go through. I think I have 3 players left and 3 coaches. I'll do them very quickly. In the Jimmy Butler and Ant tier, I had Draymond. He had a pretty bad postseason.
Yeah.
We think of him as a really, really good postseason player. I wrote here Steph Curry merchant ? I think it's a little harsh, but I think it's more just the age is catching up to him. But minus 2.5 playoff BPM, really bad. The team collapsed once Steph was out. I think you have to ding him at least a little bit. He was on my playoff up before, and he'll probably be a neutral going forward. Dante DiVincenzo. He was one who I really wanted to see what he did this postseason. He was awesome for the Knicks. He didn't carry the voodoo over. This is one that I'm willing to look another postseason because he kind of had the confidence and aura of like, I think he's going to do it at some point. I think this is like, if you sim these postseasons, this was like a 10th percentile outcome for him. I don't know if it was matchups. I don't know if it was confidence, whatever it may have been, but I think he may be back. So I don't want to write him off entirely. And then finally, Josh Hart. This is a sad one, but I had him in my Razors before the postseason when I was looking through, and I was a little surprised because a lot of the game doesn't always translate, but in the run they had last year, he was really important. This one, he really phased out. He himself went to the coach, asked to go to the bench, and maybe that's a role that he can have, but the flaws were shown in this postseason a little bit more than in some of the past. So he's my final player. And then for coaches, I had Steve Kerr. He's always got those weird rotations. At some point, it's got to reach a breaking point because, again, I mentioned that, and you did as well, that I think we're both kind of still high on this Warriors team as a concept. And if it's healthy, Kerr, is he going to be the thing that holds it back, though? Because I didn't love everything I saw from him. Kenny Atkinson, he's probably number 1 here. I'm saying him third because the others fit more narratively podcasting. That's a brutal debut from him. And just a tiny bit, this is in the Ant category. It's appropriate. It's his coach, Chris Finch. I love Chris Finch. I'm very, very high on him. I'm with Matt on that. He kind of twisted himself in knots in that OKC series. The starters, we mentioned Conley and Gobert. Their net rating was actually really, really good. It seemed like Finch was getting a little too cute at times and thinking, oh, there's no way Gobert is a good matchup. When the numbers said, I want to at least see a little bit more of it, that they were good with Gobert on the court. Now, does that make sense logically? Not at all. I see where Chris Finch is coming from. But I want to, if go with the thing that's working at least. Then you can point to something that logically says, I tried this because it was working. Now, maybe if he goes to that and they lose, we're all like, why the hell did he play Rudy Gobert? That's totally fair. He may have been in a tough spot. I still like Chris Finch, but he was probably, if you'd asked me before the postseason, I probably would have had him top 2 coaches in the postseason. I think now I'd have him like top 5 to 6. So just a tiny drop there, but kind of hand in hand with Ant of just a little bit down on the Minnesota stuff as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you were a little kind on Kenny Atkinson. I think very clearly number 1 with a bullet on the stock down for coaching, just frankly disastrous. And I know that they had the Garland injury and Mobley missed a game. You can't be the 1 seed and losing 5 in the second round. You just can't. It did not go well. So stock down for Kenny. Stock down from Brandon one more time to the New York Knicks. They were never real. It was a fluke against the Celtics. It was 50-50 against the Pistons. They weren't even competitive against the Pacers. Stock down for Cat on my list, even though I was down on him anyway. Somehow stock down on Kyle Kuzma. I didn't know it was possible to be lower on Kyle Kuzma. And then he put up a 22 trillion the first game of the playoffs forever ago. Yeah. You had a comment on Kyle Kuzma, or are you silent?
Nope, I bones with a long sigh. Yeah, exactly.
I had Malik Beasley here. There was a lot of talk about Malik Beasley as this like absolute sniper, top 5 shooter in the league. He had 6 of 13 his last game, but he could barely stay on the court before that. 34% on volume 3s. Not real big on stock down because I never super believed in him, but disappointing he couldn't get there. Tyler Hero, not for long, and not someone we were super high on, but really, really rough for him. At DiVincenzo, I had Wiggins we talked about before. Desmond Bane, OKC, OKC did it to a lot of guys, but Bane was really rough in that series. And we've now seen a regular season and now a brief playoff run with no John Morant, and could Bane step up? And boy, he could not. He did not do well at all. A little one too in the Warriors vein, Moses Moody, I thought really had come around since the Butler trade. He had gotten into the starting lineup, and I thought, great, they got the 3-and-D wing guy. He couldn't even get on the court and maybe that's Steve Kerr, but when he did get on the court, he was really rough for them as well. So I was down on Moses Moody. MPJ, hardly his fault. He has one shoulder out there, but just pretty rough appearance for him. I appreciate him gritting through, but definitely contract-wise and what he's able to give that team, not good enough for them as well. So those are some of my other guys. Let's go through just to recap the list. Our top 10, which is really a top 11 or maybe a bottom 11. I don't know how we should brand this. Our stock down. Number 1 pick, Austin Reeves, Mikal Bridges, Drew Holiday, Kawhi Leonard, and Darius Garland rounds out the top/bottom 5. Jamal Murray, Jimmy Butler, Anthony Edwards, and then Ty Jerome, and a couple of Jalen Brunson and Jaylen Brown, with the hater, Brandon, generational hater, Matt Moore, bringing the Jalens to close out the stock down draft. Yeah, I think we have learned a lot here about these players and how we think about them going forward, and a lot of pretty key important players on important teams for next year that have big questions to answer about. And as we look toward player movement and draft and some of the replacements coming in or possible trades on the horizon, I think some of these teams and players we're going to have a lot to learn from as well. So that's it for our player stock watch, a playoff stock watch. Don't forget to listen to the first episode if you have not yet. We give you about this same length with all the guys we're stuck up. And we like some players too. We had some positive things to say. You know, we got a little bit on both directions here. Be sure to listen to both of those. We'll be back, I'm sure, with some more fun draft, off-season, all sorts of stuff coming to you soon. Until next time, thanks to David Payne, our producer, Gifford Gould Production, everybody else on the team. Let's get buckets.